Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Burg, back with another episode of Go Giver Influencers Facebook Live. Today's episode is Influential IMPERIA, and we'll find out exactly what that means in just a few moments. You know, in 2020, a couple of years from now, next year, excuse me, America is going to be rightly celebrating the passage of the 19th Amendment, which officially prohibited federal and state governments from denying someone the vote based on gender. What many people, I believe, falsely believe that amendment was about was giving women the right to vote. And I believe that's incorrect. And I'll tell you why, and I'll just ask you to hang with me a moment. You see, women always, at least in this country, women always had the right to vote. Okay, because a right is natural. It's by nature. It's something you already have by nature. Government doesn't give someone a right. Groups of individuals cannot legitimately vote for someone to have a right to pursue happiness however they see fit, so long as that person isn't infringing upon the rights of anyone else, of course. So no, what the 19th Amendment really was about was acknowledging the right that women always had. However, in many places around the world, those rights are not acknowledged. I don't want to say women haven't been given those rights. They don't have to be given those rights. Women everywhere have the right to pursue happiness, to work, to live in however way they see fit, providing they don't infringe upon the rights of anyone else. But those rights are not acknowledged everywhere. And that is changing, but it needs to change more. Even in terms of the way things are framed, a great friend of mine, very, very successful person by the name of Carol Roth. She's a former investment banker who raised billions of dollars of funding. She is now a very successful entrepreneur. She's a media personality, and she tells a story that she was she gave a presentation for a large group of people, and afterwards a woman came up to her and said, "Ms. Roth, do you have one piece of advice for a female entrepreneur?" And Carol, and I know her, so I know the deadpan look she must have had on her face. She answered, "Yes, first, don't refer to yourself as a female entrepreneur." And of course, on a micro level, as an individual, no, she's just an entrepreneur, right? But on a macro level, we haven't gotten to that point yet where that's accepted enough to not need the modifier. And I've got to tell you, I am really looking forward to the day when we never need to hear the term woman president or black president or Asian president or gay president or whatever president, okay? When we can instead be living a life universally, borrowing from, of course, the great speech from the legendary Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where people are judged by the content of their character. And so I want to bring this up today in terms of women. And the guest today, she's very special to me, and I want to introduce you to her. Jennifer Iannolo is a global empowerment catalyst. And whether she's speaking at the United Nations, Harvard University, or on a tour for the U.S. State Department, her mission is to foster empowerment in women around the world. As the founder of IMPERIA, she's created a global incubator to bring together the world's change makers in one very powerful conversation. And I have a feeling this conversation is going to be very powerful. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
So before we even get into your founding of IMPERIA, you and I have been friends for a long time. And I always knew, as did many, as the really cool, awesome culinary person who went around the world starting shows, doing all these great things, but then some things changed and your direction changed. Tell us about that.
It sure did. Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit. I would have been very content to spend the rest of my life doing that. I mean, I was, jet setting and drinking champagne, and that was fine with me. And as happens to many entrepreneurs, and especially to female entrepreneurs, I burned out, worked too many hours, was in too many time zones, on too many airplanes, and woke up one day and couldn't get out of bed. And I thought, uh-oh, I think I broke something. And it turned out that I had just triggered this immune response in my body, this autoimmune response. So almost overnight, I was allergic to, major food groups, dairy and wheat and all this other stuff. And as someone with a food career, I had to do a massive pivot. And it really broke my heart because I was at the peak of my career. I had been just ticking the boxes on my bucket list.
I remember that.
Yeah. And there wasn't much left. Like, I had really achieved a lot of what I wanted to. So I'm glad for that now. And so here I was, and I thought, well, I'm pretty much halfway through, right? I'm at the halfway point in life, hopefully. And so since I have to retool everything, what's the thing that matters? What's the legacy that I want to leave behind? And I had to really think about the thing that would A, call me out of bed on the days I didn't feel well, and B, what was the thing I couldn't be with on planet Earth? What was the thing that made me crazy? And it was really the idea that at any moment in time, there's a little girl somewhere who's being murdered or abandoned or given away or sold because she's not worth anything. And I wanted to change that, or change it as much as I could on this planet before I leave. And so, I took a couple of years to really examine what that meant for me, what part of that I wanted to address, because there are lots of facets. There's human trafficking, which is very heavy and emotional, and I didn't want to do that to myself. And so I ended up working with college-aged girls a lot, and I found that that's who I really resonated with because they're at the beginning. They're just starting out their lives. And so it's been this extraordinary few years of examining what that was going to look like. And, we landed on IMPERIA as the thing. And so now it's fresh and new and exciting. And we're just, my team and I are really excited about what's next.
Okay. Tell us how you came up with IMPERIA.
Well, and I think you know this about me, Bob. I love the classics, right? I'm an old soul. And so when I look for names of things, I always go way back in language. So I went to Latin, and I thought, what are we trying to do here? We're creating power within human beings. We're igniting the power they have. So I looked at the Latin word for power, and it was imperium. So of course it was masculine. And I thought, okay, well, we're going to change that. We're going to feminize it. And so IMPERIA was the result. And we loved everything about it. We loved how regal it is. We love how powerful it is, how easily it translates among languages. And so IMPERIA was it.
Okay, so now let's go into the overarching message. Tell us about IMPERIA. Tell us what you're really looking to do and how you're looking to do it.
Yeah. So there's something that's always struck me, and it's that if you look anywhere in the world, there are always people who they have the deck stacked against them, right? They are not supposed to, statistically, they're not supposed to make it. But somehow they do. They transcend the circumstances. And when I look at people like that, I think, okay, if we can bottle whatever that is, we can literally change the world. And so it's really rooted in resilience. And so when we started looking at that, I like to call it self-directed empowerment, because it's the person who will never say die, who will do whatever it takes to make a dream a reality, to fulfill on a goal that they have. And so the goal is to bring together those women who are changing the world anyway, and take what they have and give it a rocket boost. And to put all of them in one conversation, because to be that kind of person in the world means to stand apart, and it can often be a very lonely journey. And so we wanted to be able to create a global community with women from every country on the planet where they could be in one conversation to support each other.
So Shannon Farabee has been posting, of course, as she always does so wonderfully, and she has posted the website to Imperia Global, and that's imperia.global. So make sure you click on that and check out everything that they're doing, including the blog. Hey, I was the first commenter on your blog, by the way.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And my pleasure.
I'm counting on you, Bob. I'm counting on you.
And and if you have questions for Jennifer, now's a great time to ask. And she's a wonderful person. She is filled with wisdom and knowledge and wonder. And so I'm gonna go back here. And again, Jennifer, as I was telling you earlier, everyone knows when it comes to technology, I'm not the best, and so what is it? Multitasking is not something I do particularly well. So carrying on a conversation while I'm looking and scrolling could lead to some trouble. Now, Rachel Peters
I believe in you.
John Paul says labels create division, division creates conflict. Kate O'Neill, our great friend, two of my favorite people in the conversation. And we need to talk about Kate later when we talk about your last panel for the United Nations, because Kate was one of your panelists. Niels Reeb from Denmark, one of my great friends, is there, and he says hello. All right. So, and feel free to hi Natalie Davison, and feel free to post a question or comment. So the overarching message to those you want to serve, and I want to tee you up for this one, if I may. I'm quoting: "No one is coming, not to save us, give us the answers, or give us permission to succeed." But that's not bad news, is it?
No, it's the best news ever.
Tell us.
Because, well, when you are left to your own devices, when you realize that no one's coming, it means that you actually get to drive the bus. And, it's everything that I talk about is the journey that I took myself when I got sick. Because as I was lying there in bed, I thought about my mom. Now, my mother is one of the most formidable human beings I've ever met. She's about to turn 87. And she grew up in World War II. So she said to me, I had bombs falling around my house at night. Oh. So suck it up, Buttercup. Like the world's a tough place, right? My grandmother was a Rosie the Riveter. She put on coveralls every day and welded bombs for the Royal Air Force. So I come from a certain kind of stock. And so, as I'm lying there in bed trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life now that it's been turned upside down, I thought of my mom a lot, and I thought, well, what would she do? She'd get out of bed, dust herself off, and find a purpose. And so when I realized that, I also realized, oh, I get to create whatever this is from here on out. I'm the driver, and I get to say how this goes. I get to say how I'm going to react to it. And so a lot of what we talk about at Imperia is the lens through which we see the world. So you can see something as an obstacle to overcome, or you can see it as part of the path, right? So all of these autoimmune issues that I have, they're just part of what I have, like a freckle on my shoulder, and I've got to manage that. And it is what it is. I don't have to feel a certain way about it. It doesn't have to detract from my life. It's just a thing that I have, and I have to work around it. And so when you look at people who are resilient, when you look at people who have, come up through the worst circumstances and are still optimistic and still love the world, there is a deep-rooted resilience they have that carries them through all of that. And I think that's what No One Is Coming is all about. It's about your resilience.
So we've seen so much progress over, I think, the last few years in terms of the way women are now finally given respect by men, ... or have. Sometimes I'm still not sure, especially.
I'm glad it looks that way.
Yeah. Or is it political correctness, or is it not really, but it's smoke and mirrors? Tell me about this. What's the state of the world right now in terms of this topic?
Well, I think we're making progress. It's interesting. I was just talking about lenses, right? So from your male lens, it probably seems like a lot's happening, right? A lot is changing. Things are moving forward. And from a female lens, not so much. We're just finally now talking about it, right? It's now out in the open to be discussed. And so with IMPERIA, we created a 50-year plan. We know it's going to take at least that long to make any kind of difference, because there are things happening that are well-intentioned, right? There are, for example, the government of Nepal has mandated that the president of the country be a female, which on paper to the world and to the United Nations looks fantastic. Like, finally, there is a female leader in place. However, we did a survey of 600 young people in Nepal, and she was mentioned twice as someone people look up to, because nobody takes it seriously. And so we need to separate out what's real versus what looks good and what is effective. And, we are just at the beginning. We really are just at the beginning of this conversation. And you can see it in the workplace. And it's the kind of thing where, I remember when I first started hearing about white privilege, and I found it very confusing, and I got defensive about it, as a person naturally does, until it was really explained to me, and I stopped trying to defend it and just looked at it. And I looked at it through a different lens. I got over in the other person's world and took a look, and I realized that, oh, this actually does exist. I couldn't see it. So it's the same kind of thing. There's the quote that, to someone with privilege, equality can feel like oppression, right? It feels like they're coming for you and they're going to take the thing, but it's really, we're just leveling the playing field. So yeah, so I think we're very much in the infancy of this discussion, but we're getting there.
You know what helped me a lot as a guy, I think, because I've always considered myself to be a feminist. I've always considered myself I guess with me, it's always just individual rights. So it's whether someone is, again, black, white, male, female, straight, gay. To me, it's just human rights. But while I think took pride in, my in that type of feminism, if you will, what really opened my eyes in certain ways was reading Sheryl Sandberg, with Facebook, her book Lean In.
Yeah, I've got it right next to my desk.
Yeah. And here's what it kind of did for me, Jennifer. It showed me that there were things that from a male perspective, I couldn't see. So I didn't know enough to know it may be sexist. Let me give you just an example. She talked about how when someone is speaking, let's say they're leading a meeting or doing a sales presentation for a group, and there's men and women, or doing a presentation as a speaker, what have you. So people are asking questions, men and women are, and then the speaker said, and people's hands are up, and then the speaker says, okay, let's move on. The women will often put their hands down, but the men will keep their hands up to ask questions, and then the speaker will will call on a guy to ask a question. Mm-hmm. That seems subtle, and it is subtle, I guess, but it's a big difference. Or maybe interrupting sometimes, that men have a habit of interrupting women. Little things that Sheryl brought up, and I don't know that I do, but I don't know that I don't do. And so it made me kind of, after that, think about it. And so then something came up too. I happen to know a lot of women who are very, very successful, okay? And they are individuals, and they sort of with what you said, suck it up, buttercup. And they've gone on and they have overcome, and they have just done amazing things, okay? And these are people who don't in any way live in victim mode or anything like that. And I'm going to tell you, every single one of them have told me horror stories regarding sexism that they had to go through. And I'm talking women who have just made it real big. Mm-hmm. So it's a thing. And I mean, it's a thing, and women know this. And, as I just said that, women are probably going to be commenting, duh, right? But men we don't always know that.
Right.
And I'm not virtue signaling or anything. I'm just saying that book by Sheryl really showed me that I don't necessarily know what I don't know. And women all know it because you've experienced it.
Correct. And, and I've said this countless times now. I mean, I've spoken to well over 1,000 women around the world. I have yet to meet one who has not been subject to, at the very least, sexual harassment. of some kind. So it's real. And, you know, I've had Facebook threads where people have tried to argue that with me, men, because I say, you know, I assert the numbers are closer to 100%. It's really hard to get through life without it happening to you. It's almost impossible. And so, you know, I remember when Me Too first really started gaining momentum, and I shared what it was like just to get off the subway at night, all of the things I had to think about, or just to go out for the day, all of the things I needed to think about. And some of my male friends could not believe that all of that brain space was devoted to having keys in my hand if it's after 10 o'clock. And it's like, well, that's just the reality. And so I think, again, it's because the dialogue is now being opened. I think that what would be really helpful is if men would just listen to it, stop defending it and just listen, because that would get us a lot farther, you know. And this even happens with the good guys, right? And I really acknowledge you for that, for even asking the question, like, is there, you know, I don't know what I don't know, so what more is there to learn? Because that's really important. It's empathy based, right? It's not just because you're a man, it's because you're a human being who is now faced with a different lens that is not yours. And the only thing you can do is listen.
Right. And I would love every guy to read that book. I think that would be just such a fantastic thing for every single guy to read that book. Lean In. You'll see things in there you just, again, didn't know that you didn't know. Kate O'Neill, who we're going to mention in a moment, she writes, there's no substitute for lived experience, and there's no substitute for the empathy of deferring to the reality of lived experience. Wow, that's wonderful. She has a great new book out too. Kate, put the name of would you post the name of your book and a link to that in there so we can all see it? Diane Castro writes, listen, 3 exclamation points. That applies to everything in life. Absolutely. Okay, I want to ask you about the United Nations. You recently did a panel. Yeah. Kate was on it. Someone else from our group.
Was.
Yeah, and I'm not thinking of the name. Someone else from our group that we belong to also was on it with you.
Jeanette Brunet.
Jeanette Brunet, of course, absolutely. Yep. My apologies for not remembering. First, tell us about that panel, and then I want to know what you want or expect the United Nations to, you know, how you see their role. You know, I'm always, you know, loath to have government involved in anything if they don't have to be. But I know you have plans and you have certain reasons. So tell us about your recent event there. You've spoken there before, but your recent panel and what you see with the UN.
Sure. Yeah. So the panel was, so my friends in India, there's an organization called 1M1B. It's $1 million for $1 billion. And you'll appreciate this. The goal is for them to create 1 million new entrepreneurs who will affect 1 billion new jobs being created on the planet. So, and they're doing this with teenagers who are doing the most incredible social impact projects. So we went in there to do a panel on innovation. And so I had Kate O'Neill, Jeanette Brunet, and my friend Talisa Daughtry, and they all come from different parts of the conversation of innovation. So Kate, of course, speaks about tech humanism, you know, how we're going to play nicely with those robots. Talisa works in UX and coding and like all the sort of experiential pieces of tech in the future. And then Jeanette really works on creating cultures of care and how we look as a culture of humans at, you know, in the workplace and how we implement self-care. So we kind of came at it from a bunch of different angles. And I had a very Ruth Bader Ginsburg moment where I realized, you know, I'm going to make this an all-female panel because why not? So it was an all-female panel on innovation. And we really talked about, you know, where we're headed for the future as we were talking to these young people who were creating, you know, they're preventing lakes from being on fire with pollution in India, and they're creating mobile showers for the homeless here in New York. And so they're just up to these extraordinary things, and we wanted to look at how innovation can help them on their journey.
Jen, you're right. Oh, go ahead.
No, so I was going to say, so in terms of the UN's involvement with that,
Oh, right.
they've established the Sustainable Development Goals through 2030, and so they really are. It's hard because the UN is a giant body, and it's so hard to really get anything done with a body that big. But I think they've set up an excellent framework for those Sustainable Development Goals so that everyone has a benchmark that they're striving for. So the one that we work on the most is SDG 5, which is gender equality and income equality. So it gives us somewhere to head toward. So I think it does unite the conversation globally as to, what game are we playing here and how do we measure it?
Now, the crown jewel of IMPERIA, as you've called it, is your global innovation incubator.
Yeah.
Would you tell us about that? And I believe you are now taking applications for that. So tell us about it, what's it going to do and everything.
Yeah. So we, again, wanted to bring those incredible change makers, the women who are, whether they're teachers or entrepreneurs or scientists, women who are at the cutting edge of what they're doing. We wanted to bring them together in one conversation. So the incubator is really a program that is developed around this conversation of resilience and self-directed empowerment. So we want to take women who are already on their way and give them that rocket boost, give them that community so that when they've been working 20 hours on an idea and really need someone to say, like, I get it, I get where you are and what you're going through right now, know that I'm here for you to listen. I'm here to, give you that high five from the other side of the planet. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other is that from these conversations we've had with women, and we've now been doing this for almost 5 years, we learned that it doesn't really matter what culture you grow up in and what your socioeconomic status is. There are things that bring us together as women that are impenetrable. And I've seen it in real time with someone who is 18 from Mexico and 19 in Nepal, arguing with fathers about career paths that might be a little bit dangerous, and so seeing those moments of bonding happen, we know how important it is to create this conversation. So we're really building kind of a global army of badass women working on global change.
I love that. And again, Shannon is, she already did. I love Shannon. She's amazing. You say it and it's already there. She put the application in there. By the way, Kate O'Neill's book, she put the website on there, Tech Humanist. I have the book and I can't wait to read it. Let's see. Alex Woozier wrote, "Hey, Bob, I love being here listening. Gender equality all the way. Love that." And let's just look if there's any others. Okay. All right. Jennifer, I want to go back to something you mentioned before, 2 wonderful role models you had, your grandma and your mom. So female role models, critical, not, yes. What's how does that weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely critical. And I actually have 2 others on my father's side. My grandmother had an arranged marriage in, we're talking early 30s, Southern Italy, right? So as remote as it gets. She got a divorce because she was in an abusive marriage. So she left. And so, I was brought up in this female context that I don't need to ask permission. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to declare what I'm going to do and go do it. And who's going to stop me? Right? It's very much that Ayn Rand quote. The question isn't
who's going to let me.
The question is who's going. Yeah, isn't who's going to let me. It's who's going to stop me.
Love that quote.
And so we have to be able to see it. And sometimes it's very unconscious. I mean, the whole reason I started down this path of inquiry about feminism and female empowerment was because I realized I did not have a context called feminism because my mother is from Europe and didn't talk about that. She just was one. She packed a trunk at 21 and went by herself to America, and that was that. She wasn't going to ask anyone if she could.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the woman who gave me my upbringing. And my sister is the same. She's tough as nails and she doesn't ask permission. And so when you have that around you, all of the young women that I have met who are up to extraordinary things in the middle of countries where you wouldn't expect it, it's because they had a strong mother or a strong aunt, some kind of a role model that made the difference for them. And so we need to make those role models as visible as possible. We need to offer as much mentorship as possible to young women so they can see what is possible for them.
Jennifer Iannolo is a global empowerment catalyst who's spoken at the United Nations, Harvard University. She's been on tour for the U.S. State Department, and she's on a mission to foster empowerment in women around the world. As the founder of IMPERIA, she has created a global incubator to bring together the world's change makers in one very powerful conversation. Check out the IMPERIA website at imperia.global, as well as No One Is Coming, an empowerment manifesto, and of course, their global innovation incubator. Shannon's been posting all of those throughout the show. Back with you, Jen, in 1 minute. Couple quick housekeeping notes. If you haven't picked up John David Mann and my newest book in the Go Giver series, The Go Giver Influencer, make sure you visit thegogiver.com. And while you're there, you can check out some of the other books. I don't do a lot of public events now. Mostly it's corporate conference and so forth, but every so often I do, and I've got a few coming up over the next few months. March 1st in Chandler, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, Endless Referrals, the Go Giver Way. Shannon will be posting that URL. April 24th through 26th, I'm one of a whole bunch of speakers at Outbound 2019. That's at the Georgia Conference Center in Atlanta. And Kathy Tajanels and my next Go Giver Entrepreneurs Academy 2.5-day workshop is July 18th through 20th. We limit these to just 10 people because we go deep into your business and helping to take it to the next level. The last one 2 weekends ago was sold out, so make sure you visit. Shannon will put the URL in there, and make sure and get your seat. This week's Go Giver podcast featured Mitch Jackson, who discussed social media mastery. Check that out at thegogiver.com/podcast. And of course, join our Facebook group, Go Giver Influencers, and join me there this Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for our weekly Coffee with Bob. All of these URLs again in the show, not the show notes for the blog, in the discussion guide. And make sure you check out all of Jennifer's resources. Jennifer, many thanks to you and to your entire team on what you're doing. This is just such a wonderful service you're bringing to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me here to talk about it. You've inspired me for so many years. I love everything that the Go Giver is about. It's who you are. And anyone who, is involved in this conversation is up to big things to change the world. So I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you, my friend. And that's it for today. Until next week, this is Bob Burg wishing you a great day and fantastic week. So long.